when you're thinking about, as you were looking here, is switching back and forth and making sure you know what's in your exponent, what's in your denominator, and then what goes outside your root. As you are taking a look at your graphs, first thing you want to keep in mind is that when you're graphing a quadratic, you always have to find the vertex. And sometimes the vertex is super easy, but if you have a middle term, you always got to do negative b over 2a and then find the y. In the linear, you're given key features. When you're thinking about a linear equation, anytime it's linear, you should be using slope and y-intercept, the 0b for your start point. And then this is how you're moving on your graph. So if we are looking at any of these, anyone have a question on any of them graphing, looking at our system? You could have no solution, all real numbers, or you could have one solution, two solutions, or no solution. You can't have all real numbers when you're looking at them. So questions on any of these that we could go over or take a look at? So graph your linear first. So y-intercept is -3, starting down at -3. Slope is 2, that means I'm rising up 2 and over 1. So graph my linear first. You do want to fill the whole graph so that you cover the whole graph as you are doing that. Okay? So make sure your linear one, because you might find that it intersects with your parabola in more than one point. So now we are going to go to graphing our parabola. When we go to graph our parabola, we just said to find the vertex, we're always going to do negative b over 2a. So if we are looking at our negative b, we had x squared minus 3x. So when we go to find our b, we are going to take positive 3 divided by 2, right? So negative b divided by 2 times 1, that gives us 1.5. So my vertex is over at positive 1.5. That's my axis of symmetry, right? I'm already knowing my axis of symmetry, so I might put that axis of symmetry in at 1.5. And now I'm going to plug 1.5 into my equation. So when I go to plug 1.5 into my equation, I am going to have 1.5 squared minus 3 times 1.5 plus 3, is it? Yeah. So first off, I'm thinking, is my parabola going up or down? Up, because it's a positive 1x squared, right? The 1, or the a, tells me that my parabola has to be going up. So I know my parabola is going up. I just got to find the point. So when we substitute, I know it's on that axis of symmetry, and I know my parabola goes up. So I'm going to check when x equals 2, what is my y? So I'm going to go back to that equation, and I'm going to put in 2 squared to my quadratic minus 3 times 2 plus 3. So 4 minus 6 gives me 1. Oh, that looks pretty nice, right? If I am looking at that point. Does that look like a point of intersection over at 2, 1? Was that one of mine on my graph? Yes. So I know that one is 1, and so I know on the other side, right? So if that was 2, I also know at 1 it's at 2. If we are looking at, or at 2 it's at 1, right? And so at 1 it's at 1. That's just for my parabola graph. So now I'm going to go over, I know it can't be anything on this side, so I'm going to check at 3. Could it be this nice point right here? So I plug in 3. 3 squared minus 3 times 3 plus 3? 3. Yay! So I get these 2 points of my parabola is looking like this. And my 2 solutions were actually at 2, 1 from graphing. And over at 3, 3. And if I plug in these 2 numbers, both the x and the y, if I plug in the 2, 1 and the 3, 3, they have to make both of these equations true. Well, I know they already made my quadratic true. So 2 times 2 is 4 minus 3. That works and gives me 2, 1 in the second equation, the linear one. 2 times 3 is 6 minus 3 gives me 3. So when I plug them in to check, they check in both equations. Y equals should be horizontal, right? You don't have a slope. Whereas if you're graphing an x equals, that's going to be a vertical line. It's like your axis of symmetry. So when you go to graph this one, you should have a vertical line at that point. So those would be my only 2 hints on those as you are looking at those. Doesn't matter which way you solve it. You want to get all x's. So we have a y equals and a y equals. I would put y equals to y. I would put this first equation, x squared, because I want it to be a positive x squared, minus 4x minus 5. Now in the other class yesterday, someone said, oh, I'm going to subtract the second equation. You could, or you can just write negative x minus 7. So this is y equals y. Once we have y equals y, we now want to get everything equal to 0, because we cannot solve a quadratic until everything is equal to 0. Now, if you get to something and you cannot factor it, so we have x squared at this point, we're going to have minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. So if you cannot factor, in this one, can we factor something that multiplies to 2 and adds to negative 3?
Yes.
Yeah.
Negative 2.
Negative 2, negative 1, x, that adds to negative 3. I am going to solve each parenthesis. So we're taking x minus 1 equals 0, x is equal to 1. One of my solutions. Over here, x minus 2 equals 0, x equals 2. Go back to your linear. The linear is the easiest one to solve for. So we have factored it, got our 2 solutions. I'm going to put in negative 2 minus 7, so I should get negative 9. I'm going to put in negative 1 minus 7, which gives me negative 8. And then I might check it in my quadratic. So I might put in 1 squared, which is 1, minus 4. It's a negative 4 minus 5. That works to give me negative 8. I might try the 2 in the quadratic, but it should work in both equations, as you are looking.
A catapult launches a boulder with an upward velocity of 112 feet per second. The height of the boulder, h, in feet after t seconds is given by the function. H equals negative 16 t squared plus 112 t plus 30. How long does it take the boulder to reach its maximum height? What is the boulder's maximum height? Round to the nearest 100.
So what I want you to write right behind there is, are you finding the vertex or are you finding solving? Are you finding the vertex? I just want you to write, what do you know when you read that problem? And we are asked to find how long does it take it to reach its maximum height and what is the boulder's maximum height? And they tell us we're rounding it to the nearest 100, which means we're probably either using the quadratic formula or we have to figure out something, right, to find that, or we're going to be using, we're going to get decimals and they're telling us to round it. What are we finding? Are we solving or vertex?
Vertex.
Vertex. And if you read the problem and you go, I don't know, that is not a good sign. You want to go back and go over those notes from lesson I. So vertex means when we find the time, that's our x. That's the negative b divided by 2a. When we find the height, that's using that number. So if I am finding my b, or my time, I am going to take a negative 112 divided by 2 times negative 16. The reason they tell you you're going to get a decimal is you're taking a negative 112 and dividing it by negative 32. Should time be positive? Yeah, so when you get an answer for time, it has to be positive. When you divided that, what did we get? 3.5. Our answer would be in seconds. So we're picturing this. This is our parabola, right? We're at 3.5 seconds. That's our axis of symmetry. And now we want to find the height. So now you're just going to plug that in. Okay? So to find the height, you are going to use this equation. Remember, it is always negative 16. That's the force of gravity. Then you're plugging in 3.5 and substituting that in to get your answer. Question 78. Tristan, would you please read number 78?
You purchased a used car for $5,000. The value of your car depreciates 15% every year. Find the value of your car after 5 years.
Okay. So, first thing we want to look at, is it exponential or is it quadratic? Because most of the ones you're going to be looking at are going to either be quadratic for this type or they're going to be exponential. So, this is our exponential. What's the form of exponential? Y equals a times b to the x. you will be asked to write the equation first as you are looking at these. So on the final, I'm going to ask you to give me the equation and then tell me in 5 years. So when I look at this, what was my start value of my car? 5,000. It's depreciating 15% a year. Are we adding 15% in value or taking off 15%? Taking off. So what are we taking it away from? From 100. So 1 minus 0.15. Could you use 0.85? Yes. You cannot use 0.15. That would mean your car is going down 85% in value. That wouldn't be good. And then this is going to be, in this case, to the x, which our x is going to be 5. Okay? So if I ask you to just write the equation, this would be your equation. And now you're going to put it in your calculator, and you're going to tell me. And in this case, since you're working with money, you're going to round it to the nearest cent. Right? So you're going to put that one in your calculator. Okay? All right. 79. Emily, you want to read it for us?
Memorize 5 Spanish vocabulary words and memorize 2 times that amount each week for the next 10 weeks. Write an exponential growth model and then evaluate it.
So what we are saying is that we learned how many words to start with? 5. And it says we are memorizing 2 times each week. So times 2 for 10 weeks. And a lot of times when you write your original equation, what I'd probably look at is that you give me something like y equals 5 times 2 to the x. And then you would solve it and give me this answer. If you haven't done 83 through 87, and I want you to tell me, I just want you to write by the problem vertex or solve. Vertex or solve. So read through 83 to 86 and decide how many vertexes should I have. Only 83 is a vertex, right? 84, 85, and 86 are all solved. When I say solve the quadratic, that means I want it equal to a height of 0, except this last one says we want it when it's higher than 1,000. So this one, we're going to write our equation of negative 16t squared plus 315t plus 0 equals 1,000. And here it says determine how long that rocket is out of sight. So keep in mind our rocket just went something like this, right? And this is my 1,000 feet. So here's the clouds right here, right? So these are the clouds I can't see above the clouds. I want to know how long it's at 1,000. And I want you to keep in mind that it was at 1,000 in 2 different time periods, right? It's at 1,000 feet over here, and it's at 1,000 feet at this point. So when you are looking at those 2 points, what you have to do is take this time and take the time over here, and you have to subtract those. And that's where a lot of you got that wrong, that you couldn't find the number. You're like, I got these 2 times, I got 1 and 7 for the 112 when you did that. But, so, do we want to go through it? So I'm going to have, and since I have it equal to 0, I might want to be checking if I can divide negative 16 squared plus 315t minus 1,000 equals 0. And keep in mind, you should be using the quadratic formula someplace, right? Because part of our solving quadratics, when you get to that part on that second day of the test, is going to be that you should use the quadratic formula. So when we are taking a look at this one, 16 doesn't go into 1,000, so I am going to start with my time, and I'm using the quadratic formula. And some of you still write down the quadratic formula wrong. And if you're singing the song in your head, it is still, when you do that negative b, make sure you make that a plus minus. That's because you are doing the b squared. And I would write it down because some of you, like this morning, I had a couple people working, and they just put b instead of b squared. And so sometimes some people don't put the plus minus. And so just write everything down because on the final, you want to get as many points as possible. So in this case, we are going to start with a negative 315. We're going to have a plus and a minus, and our answer is going to be, and you're going to be putting this in your calculator, 315 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times negative 1,000. divided by 2 negative 32 times negative 16. So if I'm looking at that at 3.98, that's the time, 3.98 when we reach 1,000 feet. And then the other answer is at how many seconds? 15.7 seconds. So that's here, 15.7. And I want to know how long it's above 1,000. What a lot of you did on the test was you added them. And you should have subtracted. So you're taking 15.7 minus 3.98 to get your solution to that. You're looking at how much time it was above. Okay? So that's, as I'm looking at 45, power to a power means I'm multiplying. So x to the second raised to the second is x to the fourth, 5 to the second. I'm going to have x to the fourth over 25 as I'm looking at 45. Okay? As I'm looking at question number 48. 48, you got to be careful, you have each thing raised to a power. So when I look at 48, I have to think of doing this as 2 to the fourth, f to the fourth, g is raised to the third and the fourth. That means you're taking 3 times 4, or g to the 12. And you could write g to the 12. And then this last one, f, what happens when you take 1/2 times 2? It's just f to the first, right? So that's a lot easier than it looks. It looked like an ugly problem, and it really wasn't that bad. So 2 to the fourth, again, you're going to have your calculator, so you probably put it in your calculator. Should be 16. I have f to the fourth and f to the first, so that's going to be f to the fifth, and g to the 12th. So not as bad as it looks, okay? As we were looking at that one. When we look at number 49, we have power to a power. So we need to get rid of those parentheses first as you were looking at that. So we have x to the 6th and y to the, we're going to multiply. 7 times 3 will give us 21. In our denominator, they were both to the -1 power. Well, -1 means we could do the reciprocal. I could take them each to the -1 power, but to make them positive, so if I think of this, this was x to the -1 and y to the -1. So I'm going to move it up. That's going to become x to the 6 minus the -1. That's going to be x to the 7, y to the 27. The biggest problem in number 30 is people will try and move the -3. The -3 is not to a negative exponent. Only move negative exponents, not negative numbers. Okay. Any other questions through the bottom of 54 looking at those? As we're looking at exponent rule. So again, go back to and look at unit F as you are looking at that, and make sure that as you're doing the problems, they're making sense to you. So any other exponent ones? Graphing quadratics. I don't think we need to take a lot of time with that. We just graphed one earlier, but this is a super easy one, right? Parabola goes up. What do we know the vertex is? There's no middle term. So you want to be able to graph quickly and think about those equations. I don't know, do we need to look at some of the graphing of any other ones? Anything else you want me to look at your exponentials is think about an XY table. And the easiest one to find should be at 0. So I'm going to put in 2 times 4/5. And can I put 4/5 as 0.8 on my calculator instead of 4/5 for sure? 0.8 to the 0 power. Anything to the 0 power, that'd be a super easy test question, should be 1. So 0.8 to the 0 is 1, which leaves at 0, 2. So I'm going to put 0, 2. I might find at 1. So now I'm going to put 2 times 0.8 to the first. So on your calculator, you should take 0.8 times 2. To find to the second, we're going to take 2 times 0.8 to the second power. We are also probably going to do -1 and -2. So at 1, what did we end up with? 1.6, so a little above here, right? So a little above 1, kind of between 1 and 2. And when we put in 0.8 to the second, and then took it times 2, we ended up at, and maybe you want to figure out what 4 is, right? 0.2 to the 4th power, or 0.2 times 0.8 to the 4th power. And what you should be seeing is that it's going to kind of come along here, but it never hits 0. And now do -1. So when I do -1, I'm taking 2 times 0.8 to the -1 power. I'm going to put it in my calculator that way. Do that now. Put in 2 times 0.8 to the -1 power. If this number is between, if your number you're raising to a power is between 0 and 1, it's a decimal, you should always be decaying. If it's greater, you're going to be growing. So 57, when I look at that one's going to be going up, right, as I look at that. But you do want to get the key features as you are looking at this, okay? 476, and it says solve. All you want to do is find setting your 2 parentheses equal to 0 and solve it. Whereas if I have an x squared and only a number and I don't have a middle term, you got to be recognizing that you have to find the square roots as you look at them. So